How to recognize Jesus when his presence feels absent. The silent room of the soul. There is a part of you where no one else can enter, where the clamor of the world cannot reach, and where even your own thoughts echo differently. It is in this silent room that Jesus chooses to meet you, not in fire or thunder, but in a quiet that demands attention and patience. You may have searched for him in crowds, in sermons, in sudden bursts of emotion, and found nothing. That is because his presence is often hidden in plain sight, in the subtle pauses and empty spaces that the world calls meaningless. This room, this silence, is not a punishment, but a sanctuary, a place where your soul can learn to discern the rhythm of his voice and the pattern of his work. It is here, in this sacred stillness, that spiritual sensitivity is awakened, that your heart begins to recognize him in ways it never could when distracted by noise and distraction. The absence you feel is a deliberate shaping. In every unanswered question, every restless night, every tear shed in solitude, he is working. You may not perceive it immediately, but the silence is preparing your spirit to notice the invisible, to follow the gentle nudges and subtle movements that would otherwise pass unnoticed. The world teaches us to equate presence with spectacle, with excitement and loud proof. But the divine often chooses a different language, a language of quiet faith, of invisible threads that bind circumstances, thoughts, and encounters into a tapestry only the attentive soul can perceive. This room challenges you to confront your impatience, to wrestle with doubt, and to release the need for constant reassurance. It asks you to trust beyond what you can see, to believe that absence does not equal abandonment, and that the lack of sensation does not mean he is not at work. Here, your faith is not measured by feelings, but by awareness, by the ability to perceive subtle evidence of his presence, a comforting thought at the right moment, a word that shifts your perspective, a coincidence that guides your steps. Each of these is a footprint of Jesus moving silently through your life, and learning to see them is the art of spiritual recognition. The silent room also teaches patience, humility, and attentiveness. It strips away dependency on the external and directs the gaze inward, where the heart can tune to a frequency beyond noise and distraction. Your soul begins to notice patterns, connections, and movements that speak of him without words. You begin to recognize that absence is not emptiness, but a stage of preparation, a necessary pause that allows your spirit to attune itself to his quiet voice. Every moment in this room, no matter how uncomfortable, is an opportunity to refine perception, to strengthen faith, and to develop a deeper intimacy with the one who never truly leaves, even when he seems invisible. Here, in this silent room of the soul, you are learning to recognize Jesus, not by the grandeur of miracles, but by the subtlety of his constant care. You are discovering that spiritual growth thrives not in noise, but in attentive stillness, that true sensitivity is cultivated in waiting, and that his presence can be felt in ways the world cannot understand. This is where the journey begins, where the invisible footprints become visible to the patient, where the quiet prepares you to see him in every part of life, even when he feels absent. The silent room is not empty. It is alive with his guidance, waiting for the moment your heart can fully perceive it. Hidden footprints. Even when the world feels loud and overwhelming, Jesus leaves traces of himself in ways you often fail to notice. These are not always dramatic or obvious. They are subtle movements in your life, hidden footprints that appear in moments so small you might dismiss them. A word that comforts you at the right time, an unexpected solution to a problem, a sudden thought that redirects your choices. These are all signs of his hand guiding you. When his presence feels absent, it is not because he is gone, but because his work is woven quietly into the fabric of your everyday life, waiting for you to recognize it. Learning to see these footprints requires attention, reflection, and a willingness to look beyond the obvious. Many believe that recognizing Jesus depends on emotional highs, visible signs, or miraculous events, but most of his influence is subtle, operating in the background of your experiences. The person who appears at the perfect moment, the conversation that changes your perspective, the coincidences that feel too precise to be random. All of these are his whispers in your world. Each footprint, while small, builds a path that leads you closer to understanding his presence, even when you cannot feel it directly. Your task is to slow down, to notice patterns, and to allow yourself to see his guidance in ways that are quiet but unmistakable once recognized. The hidden footprints also challenge your assumptions. You might look for grand gestures and overlook the small ones. You may think absence equals abandonment, but the truth is that his presence often works through the ordinary, the routine, and the seemingly mundane. A moment of unexpected clarity in your thoughts, a deepened compassion for someone around you, or a sense of peace in chaos. These are the subtle marks of his guidance. Each step, though almost imperceptible, points toward him and builds a trail for your soul to follow. Recognizing hidden footprints transforms the way you see life itself. Every event, every interaction, every challenge carries the potential to reveal his presence if you are attentive. It trains your spiritual eyes to discern beyond appearances, to see his hand in circumstances others might call random, and to trust that the absence you feel is actually a veil behind which his careful orchestration is at work. Learning to perceive these traces strengthens faith, develops patience, and deepens intimacy with the one who moves in silence, proving that even in seeming absence, he is guiding, shaping, and walking beside you. These hidden footprints teach that the greatest encounters with Jesus are not always loud or dramatic. They are small, consistent, and often invisible until your heart learns to recognize them. Once you attune to these subtle movements, absence no longer feels empty, and silence becomes a language through which you can hear him. Every overlooked detail, every ordinary moment, every tiny nudge is part of a pattern waiting for your awareness. Following these hidden footprints leads to a deeper understanding, a faith that trusts beyond sight, and a life attuned to the constant presence of Jesus, even when he seems hidden. The weight of waiting. Waiting is heavy. It presses on your chest, fills your mind with questions, and tests every ounce of your faith. You pray, you hope, you long for a sign or a breakthrough, and the days stretch endlessly with no response. Yet this wait is not a punishment, it is preparation. Every moment of waiting shapes your character, strengthens your spirit, and trains your heart to recognize Jesus even when he feels absent. Waiting teaches you patience in a world that values speed, trust when evidence is scarce, and endurance when hope seems fragile. During these seasons, it is easy to measure his presence by what you feel. You may mistake silence for abandonment, absence for indifference. But the truth is that waiting is the quiet workshop of the soul. In these moments, he is refining your perception, aligning circumstances, and orchestrating events in ways your eyes cannot yet see. The pause is not emptiness. It is the stage on which unseen miracles are taking shape. Each unanswered prayer, each delayed answer, is a sign that he is moving behind the scenes, building your readiness for what lies ahead. The weight of waiting also reveals what you truly rely on. When everything is silent, when solutions do not appear, and when feelings of despair try to overwhelm, your heart is tested. This is where faith transforms from belief in what you can see to trust in what you cannot. Your spirit learns to recognize subtle guidance, quiet nudges, and the gentle presence that has been there all along, even when emotions fail to confirm it. Waiting teaches discernment, showing you how to distinguish between fleeting impressions and the soft but steady touch of Jesus guiding your life. In this season, notice the small movements that point to him. The timing of events, the people who enter your path at the perfect moment, the thoughts that bring clarity, all of these are markers that he has not abandoned you. Waiting is a spiritual lens that sharpens your ability to perceive His hand in ways that speed and comfort never could. The wait you feel is proof of His preparation, evidence that your heart is being readied to recognize Him fully. The weight of waiting is not meant to break you, it is meant to awaken you. It trains your eyes to see beyond immediate circumstances, your heart to trust beyond feelings, and your spirit to recognize the presence of Jesus even when He feels absent. In the tension between longing and patience, silence and expectation, your faith matures, your awareness deepens, and your soul begins to perceive Him in the quiet orchestration of life. Waiting is the bridge between doubt and revelation, absence and recognition, and it carries the power to transform your understanding of His constant presence. Whispers in the ordinary. Life is full of moments that seem ordinary, repetitive, even meaningless. Yet in these very moments, Jesus is speaking. When His presence feels absent, it is often because we are searching for grandeur, for signs that shout, for experiences that shake the world. The truth is that He prefers to move in subtlety, in the quiet alignment of events, in the seemingly trivial occurrences that shape your path in ways you cannot yet understand. A conversation that inspires you, a thought that shifts your perspective, an encounter that seems random. These are whispers of His presence, guiding, teaching, and protecting you. The ordinary is where faith is refined. When you start paying attention, patterns begin to emerge. Moments that once appeared insignificant now carry meaning. A small act of kindness, a word spoken at exactly the right time, a feeling of reassurance that comes unbidden. These are His fingerprints. They are often overlooked because they are quiet, but they are consistent and intentional. Learning to notice them changes everything. You begin to see that absence is never absolute, that even in the routine, His work is being accomplished, and that His presence is woven into the fabric of your daily life. Whispers in the ordinary require your attention. They demand that you slow down, reflect, and trust that what appears small can carry immense significance. These subtle signals teach patience, attentiveness, and discernment. They show that Jesus is not limited to moments of emotion or spectacle. He is moving in the background, orchestrating circumstances, guiding decisions, and revealing Himself in ways that are quiet but unmistakable once you are attuned. The ordinary becomes extraordinary when seen through this lens, and the absence you feared transforms into a subtle, constant presence. Recognizing these whispers strengthens faith. You learn to rely not on dramatic confirmation, but on consistent, subtle evidence of His guidance. Every ordinary moment becomes an opportunity to notice Him, to feel His influence, and to trust His timing. When you perceive the divine in what others dismiss, you cultivate spiritual sensitivity, a readiness to recognize Him even when life seems mundane or empty. The whispers in the ordinary are proof that Jesus never truly leaves. He moves quietly, leaving evidence in plain sight, waiting for hearts that are willing to notice, willing to trust, and willing to follow, even when the world seems indifferent. The mirror of emotions. Feelings are powerful, and they can often lie. When His presence feels absent, your emotions may tell you that you are forgotten, that your prayers go unheard, or that faith is futile. Anger, frustration, loneliness, or doubt can cloud your perception, making it difficult to recognize Jesus, even when He is near. The challenge is that your heart can mistake emotional turbulence for spiritual absence, interpreting temporary darkness as permanent abandonment. Understanding this is the first step in learning to see Him beyond your emotions, to recognize the constancy of His presence regardless of how you feel. Emotions are mirrors, reflecting not always reality, but perception. They can magnify doubts and fears while hiding subtle signs of His guidance. A fleeting sense of peace, a thought that redirects you, or a small coincidence might go unnoticed because the louder voices of disappointment or discouragement dominate your mind. By learning to read beyond these reflections, you begin to distinguish between what is felt and what is true. Jesus is constant. He does not leave you when your feelings fluctuate. The task is to train your awareness to recognize his fingerprints in moments that emotions might otherwise mask. This mirror of emotions also teaches resilience. When your heart wavers, when despair threatens to overwhelm, it is not a signal of abandonment, but an invitation to strengthen your discernment. By observing the subtle ways he moves, through gentle nudges, through answered prayers in unexpected forms, through guidance that appears in ordinary circumstances, you begin to rely on awareness and trust rather than transient emotional proof. Each moment of emotional struggle becomes a lesson in perception, a chance to cultivate faith that endures beyond feelings. Learning to navigate this mirror transforms your spiritual journey. You start to notice patterns, signs, and guidance that are consistent even when your emotions are not. You discover that absence is often an illusion, that Jesus' presence is unwavering, and that the key to recognition is not sensation, but attentive faith. The mirror of emotions reveals not only the challenge of misperception, but also the opportunity for growth, teaching you to discern him amidst the noise of your heart and to trust his presence even when it cannot be felt. Invisible threads. Life is a web of events, choices, and encounters, and within this web, Jesus weaves invisible threads that connect everything with purpose. When his presence feels absent, it is often because these connections are hidden, subtle, and easy to overlook. A chance meeting, a sudden insight, a shift in circumstance. These threads link experiences in ways that are not immediately visible, but carry divine intention. Recognizing them requires a mind attentive to patterns, a heart open to guidance, and the willingness to see the hand of God behind what seems random. These threads are proof that absence does not mean he is not working. Even when life feels chaotic, when answers are delayed, or when prayers seem unanswered, the threads remain. They connect people, moments, and decisions in ways that guide you toward growth, protection, and fulfillment. Learning to see these invisible connections transforms your understanding of reality. What once appeared as coincidence now becomes evidence of his constant care. You begin to notice how seemingly unrelated events are orchestrated with precision, how challenges create opportunities, and how moments of clarity emerge in perfect timing. The invisible threads also teach patience and discernment. You cannot always trace them immediately or understand their full meaning, but trusting in their presence strengthens your faith. They show that even when you feel isolated, overlooked, or forgotten, you are part of a carefully woven plan. Each connection, no matter how small, carries significance. They are reminders that Jesus is present in the architecture of your life, moving behind the scenes, guiding your steps, and shaping outcomes in ways your eyes cannot yet see. Learning to perceive these threads opens your heart to a deeper awareness. You begin to recognize patterns, feel guidance in subtle nudges, and trust the timing of events rather than relying solely on visible evidence. The more attentive you become, the more you see how his presence is interwoven into every aspect of life, even in moments that feel empty. Invisible threads reveal that absence is only a perception, that his care is constant, and that recognizing him requires awareness, patience, and faith that extends beyond what the senses can detect. The gift of unanswered prayers. There is a weight in unanswered prayers that feels heavy, like your voice disappears into silence and leaves you alone with longing. You may ask why your cries are not met with immediate response, why your hopes seem paused, or why God's presence feels distant. Yet these unanswered prayers are not neglect. They are gifts. They shape your faith, refine your heart, and teach you to rely on Jesus beyond the immediacy of gratification. Every delay, every silence is an invitation to trust him more deeply, to perceive his guidance even when it does not arrive in the form you expected. Unanswered prayers teach you to look beyond outcomes and focus on connection. They encourage patience, humility, and attentiveness to the quiet ways he operates. Often in these moments, he is working behind the scenes, orchestrating circumstances that you could not arrange for yourself. The absence of immediate answers sharpens spiritual awareness, drawing you to notice subtle signs, gentle nudges, and the ordinary moments that carry divine significance. The gift is in learning that faith is not built on what is seen or felt, but on trust in a presence that is constant and faithful. These prayers also reveal hidden lessons. They show you where your reliance has been misplaced, where your heart seeks control instead of surrender, and where you can grow in patience and understanding. By facing longing without immediate fulfillment, you are trained to recognize the invisible, to sense guidance in the ordinary, and to discern the movement of Jesus even when the expected response is delayed. The gift is not in the answer itself, but in the transformation that occurs within your spirit as you wait and observe. Learning to embrace unanswered prayers reshapes your perception of presence. You begin to see absence not as abandonment but as preparation, silence as an instrument of growth, and delay as a doorway to deeper awareness. Each unanswered prayer becomes a marker of divine orchestration, a reminder that Jesus is never truly absent, and a lesson in trusting beyond what you can see or feel. The gift lies in the awakening of your soul to recognize him in ways that immediate fulfillment could never teach. The presence in paradox. Life often presents contradictions that challenge your understanding and shake your sense of security. You may encounter situations that seem unfair, confusing, or even discouraging, and in those moments, Jesus can feel distant. Yet paradox is one of the ways he reveals himself, showing that his presence does not always align with expectations. When outcomes defy logic or events seem contrary to hope, these moments are invitations to look deeper, to perceive him beyond what the eyes and feelings suggest, and to trust that his work is unfolding even in ways that appear opposite to your desires. Paradox teaches that absence is not abandonment. When blessings come through hardship, when clarity emerges from confusion, or when growth follows struggle, these contradictions are evidence of his subtle presence. You may not feel peace or see immediate solutions, yet he is orchestrating paths, shaping character, and revealing purposes that are invisible to the hurried mind. Trusting him in paradox requires surrender, a willingness to believe that his ways surpass understanding, and faith that perception of absence can coexist with his constant care. In these moments, notice the tension. The very contradictions that seem to separate you from him are often the instruments through which your awareness is sharpened. Life's paradoxes highlight the invisible threads, the quiet guidance, and the lessons embedded in unexpected outcomes. They teach patience, resilience, and the ability to recognize his fingerprints in situations that initially appear confusing or contrary. Paradox challenges the way you measure his presence, moving you from reliance on certainty to a deeper, more intuitive trust in his orchestration. Recognizing Jesus in paradox transforms the way you view every struggle, delay, and unexpected twist. You learn to see his hand in the alignment of events, to discern meaning in contradiction, and to embrace the truth that he works even when logic fails to explain it. In the tension of paradox, absence becomes a signal to look closer, to trust deeper, and to understand that his presence can be most profound when it defies expectation. It is in these contradictions that faith matures, awareness deepens, and the invisible yet undeniable work of Jesus becomes evident to the patient heart. Spiritual sight beyond the senses. There is a way of seeing that goes beyond eyes and ears, a vision that perceives without relying on emotion or evidence. When Jesus feels absent, the physical and emotional senses often deceive, leaving doubt and confusion in their wake. Spiritual sight trains you to recognize his presence through awareness, intuition, and understanding, noticing guidance in moments that the world would call ordinary or coincidental. It is the ability to perceive his movement even when nothing visible confirms it, to trust what cannot be measured, and to follow a path illuminated by subtle nudges rather than dramatic signs. This sight requires practice and attentiveness. You begin by observing patterns, listening to your inner convictions, and noting experiences that carry significance beyond chance. A thought that shifts perspective, a timely word from someone else, or a sudden clarity in decision-making, all of these become markers of his presence. The senses may fail, but spiritual vision grows stronger with awareness, allowing you to see the invisible threads that connect your life and the careful guidance that shapes it. This is a discipline of trust, a willingness to follow even when the path is unseen, and a confidence in his orchestration when outcomes are not immediately clear. Spiritual sight also refines discernment. You learn to distinguish between fleeting impulses and the steady influence of Jesus in your life. The heart becomes a compass, sensitive to his movement, and your spirit learns to rely on perception rather than sensation. This awareness strengthens faith, enabling you to recognize his presence in silence, absence, and the hidden layers of everyday life. You start to perceive what is constant and unwavering, even when feelings and circumstances suggest otherwise. By cultivating spiritual sight beyond the senses, absence no longer feels empty or threatening. You see that his presence is always at work, even when it cannot be felt or seen. You recognize the guidance, protection, and orchestration that pervade life's moments, learning to follow with trust and awareness. The more attuned you become, the more obvious his invisible hand appears, proving that he is never absent but always subtly present, guiding, shaping, and walking beside you, even when the world seems unaware. The language of stillness. Stillness is not emptiness. It is a language, a channel through which Jesus speaks to hearts willing to listen. When his presence feels absent, the world often rushes in to fill the void, masking the subtle ways he communicates. Silence, reflection, and solitude are not voids to be feared, but instruments through which awareness deepens and perception sharpens. In the quiet, your soul begins to distinguish between noise and guidance, between fleeting thoughts and divine direction. This stillness becomes a bridge to recognize him in ways that constant activity or distraction could never reveal. In stillness, the ordinary transforms. Moments that once seemed unremarkable become conduits of insight. A pause in your day, a breath in tension, or a moment of intentional reflection can reveal his presence in thought, emotion, and circumstance. The world measures presence by action and spectacle, but God often works in pauses, in gaps, in moments where time feels suspended. Learning to embrace these moments trains your heart to perceive him beyond the obvious, to recognize subtle nudges, and to trust that absence is often preparation. Stillness cultivates attentiveness. It teaches patience, focusing the mind and opening the heart to notice the invisible threads that connect events and people. It refines discernment, showing which impressions are fleeting and which are his guidance. In solitude, the soul becomes receptive to his subtle language, allowing you to experience his presence without relying on dramatic signs or emotional highs. Each silent moment becomes a lesson, a doorway to understanding, and a space where faith grows beyond what the senses perceive. By practicing the language of stillness, you discover that absence is temporary, that silence can carry profound presence, and that God's voice can be heard even without words. You learn to trust the quiet orchestration of life, to notice his fingerprints in reflection, and to recognize that the still moments are not empty, but alive with guidance. In this language, the soul becomes attuned to him, and absence transforms from fear to opportunity, silence into a pathway to awareness, and stillness into a sacred space where Jesus is deeply present. Signs in shadows. There are moments when life feels dark, when challenges loom, and when his presence seems impossible to detect. These are the shadows where his guidance often hides, subtle and easily overlooked. In trials, uncertainty, or difficulty, Jesus moves in ways that are quiet but powerful, leaving signs that are visible only to those who look closely. A choice that leads to unexpected clarity, a comforting thought during despair, or a shift in perspective after a struggle. These are the markers of his presence, waiting for hearts willing to notice. Shadows are not voids. They are canvases where his light works unseen, shaping, guiding, and revealing truths that the brightness of ease could never teach. The shadowed moments teach vigilance. When life feels overwhelming, it is natural to focus on what is wrong, what is missing, and what you cannot see. Yet these shadows contain evidence of his work. Patterns emerge when you pay attention, coincidences take on meaning, and lessons appear where you least expect them. Recognizing these signs requires attentiveness, reflection, and trust that he is operating behind the veil of difficulty. What feels like absence is often a space where his influence is quiet but profound, moving events, hearts, and circumstances with precision. Shadows also refine faith. They challenge reliance on comfort and evidence, teaching endurance, discernment, and awareness. Each difficult situation carries with it subtle indicators of his nearness. An unexpected word, a timely encounter, a thought that redirects your path. By observing these signs, your perception sharpens, your spiritual sensitivity grows, and your heart learns to recognize him even when the world seems dim. The darkness becomes a lens through which presence can be discovered, a testing ground where faith is strengthened and awareness is heightened. Learning to see signs in shadows transforms how you approach life. Absence is reframed not as emptiness, but as hidden guidance. Challenges are no longer only trials, but opportunities to notice his fingerprints. Every shadow contains a trace of his presence, waiting for a heart attuned to recognize it. In this awareness, doubt gives way to understanding, fear gives way to trust, and the invisible hand of Jesus becomes undeniable, even when his presence is not immediately felt. Shadows reveal that he is never absent. He simply chooses to work in subtle, quiet ways that reveal themselves to those who watch and wait. Awakened to the unseen. There comes a moment when everything clicks, when your heart begins to perceive what was always there but hidden, when the absence you once feared transforms into awareness. Awakening to the unseen is the realization that Jesus has been moving in your life all along, even in silence, even in shadows, even when feelings suggested otherwise. Your faith no longer depends on what you can see or feel, but rests in the understanding that his presence is constant, orchestrating, and deeply personal. This awakening is not sudden. It is cultivated through patience, attentiveness, and the willingness to trust beyond perception. To awaken to the unseen, you begin noticing the subtle threads that connect events, the hidden guidance in ordinary moments, and the footprints that were always there, quietly shaping your path. Every unanswered prayer, every season of waiting, every moment of doubt becomes a teacher, revealing that absence does not equal abandonment. You learn to see his hand in the ordinary, to recognize whispers of guidance, and to understand that stillness and silence are not empty spaces, but sacred places where connection deepens. This awareness transforms how you navigate life, allowing you to trust him in ways that are invisible to the world, but vivid to your spirit. This awakening also reshapes perception of time and expectation. You begin to understand that what seems like delay or emptiness is preparation, that subtle guidance is more powerful than dramatic intervention, and that the quiet orchestration of life is filled with purpose. You recognize the paradoxes, the invisible threads, the hidden signs in shadows, and the language of stillness as instruments through which he communicates. Every moment, even those that felt empty, now becomes evidence of his presence and care. Awakened to the unseen, faith reaches a new depth. You no longer chase signs but recognize them. You no longer fear silence but inhabit it. You no longer doubt absence but trust in the unseen work of a God who is always present, always guiding, and always shaping your life. This is the culmination of learning to recognize Jesus when his presence feels absent, a heart attuned, a spirit awake, and a life lived in constant awareness of the invisible yet undeniable nearness of the Savior. This is where trust transforms into intimacy, doubt gives way to certainty, and absence becomes the doorway to the deepest recognition of his eternal presence.